When Claire and I first moved into our house in Willow Creek, we were thrilled. The neighborhood seemed perfect: clean streets, friendly faces, and homes that looked like they belonged in a magazine. But the real gem was our backyard. It wasn't enormous, but it had charm. There was a big oak tree with a tire swing hanging from one of its sturdy branches, flower beds bursting with color, and plenty of open space for our kids to play. We could already picture ourselves hosting summer barbecues or cozy evenings sitting by a fire pit under the stars. Life felt peaceful until Karen showed up. Karen Whitmore was the head of the HOA's beautification committee, which sounded fancy until you realized it basically meant she bossed everyone around about how their yards should look. She arrived at our door one sunny Saturday morning wearing sunglasses so large they could have doubled as goggles and carrying a clipboard like it was some kind of weapon. Her lips curled into a smile that didn't quite match her steely gaze. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," she said sweetly, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "Isn't it a beautiful day?" I nodded politely, though something about her tone made my stomach tighten. Sweet talk from Karen usually meant trouble. "As you may know," she continued, "Willow Creek values community spirit above all else. After much thought and consultation with the board, we believe your backyard would make an excellent location for weekly yoga sessions." My mouth dropped open. Weekly yoga? In my backyard. "I'm sorry," I said, trying to stay calm, "but this is private property. You can't just take over someone's yard because you feel like it." Karen tilted her head slightly, her expression shifting to one of mock sympathy. "Oh dear, no one's taking over anything. We simply want to utilize this space for the greater good of the neighborhood. Imagine the benefits: a healthier community, stronger bonds, improved mental well-being." She emphasized each word as if reciting lines from a commercial. Before I could respond, she shoved a thick stack of papers into my hands. "Here's the proposal. Take your time reviewing it, though I'm sure you'll agree it's a wonderful idea." With that, she spun on her heel and walked away, leaving me standing there dumbfounded. Later that evening, I told Claire what happened. At first, she laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. Weekly yoga in our backyard. That woman has completely lost touch with reality. But as the days went by, Karen's persistence grew harder to ignore. Flyers started appearing in mailboxes advertising the Backyard Wellness Initiative. Someone spray-painted "Future Yoga Oasis" on our wooden fence overnight. A petition began circulating among the neighbors, urging us to comply with Karen's vision. The pressure mounted, and I couldn't help but feel like we were being backed into a corner. "This is ridiculous," Claire muttered one night while sorting through the pile of documents Karen had given me. "They can't force us to give up our land, right?" Legally, no, they couldn't. But dealing with Karen wasn't about logic. It was about power. She thrived on control, bending rules and twisting words until people gave in just to avoid conflict. And now she'd set her sights on our little slice of paradise. As I stared out the window at the oak tree swaying gently in the breeze, I made a decision. If Karen wanted a fight, she'd get one, but not in the way she expected. Little did she know, her obsession with yoga was about to meet its match, in the form of roaring engines and spinning tires. The more Karen pushed, the angrier I got. It wasn't just about yoga, it was about principle. This was our backyard, not some communal space for her to take over whenever she felt like it. Yet every time I tried to explain this to her or anyone else on the HOA board, they acted like I was being unreasonable. "It's for the community," they'd say, as if that magically excused everything. Things escalated quickly. Flyers started showing up in mailboxes across the neighborhood, urging people to attend meetings about the Backyard Wellness Initiative. The flyers had pictures of smiling people stretching on yoga mats, with captions like "Join us for a healthier tomorrow" and "Transform Willow Creek together." It all sounded so wholesome, until you realized it meant invading someone's personal property. One evening, Claire and I came home to find our fence vandalized. Someone had spray-painted "Future Yoga Oasis" in bright red letters across the wood. My blood boiled. Who did these people think they were? Did they really believe they could bully us into giving up our land? "They're trying to shame us into submission," Claire said, shaking her head as she inspected the damage. Her voice was calm, but I could see the frustration in her eyes. Even she, who usually preferred avoiding conflict, looked ready to fight back. Karen didn't stop there. A petition began circulating among the neighbors, asking us to voluntarily hand over our backyard for yoga sessions. The irony of the word voluntarily wasn't lost on me. If enough people signed, the HOA would use it as leverage to pressure us even further. Neighbors we'd waved hello to for months suddenly avoided eye contact when they passed by our house. Some even muttered under their breath about how selfish we were being. "They don't understand," Claire said one night after another exhausting day of dealing with this mess. "They only hear what Karen tells them. She makes it sound like we're ruining the neighborhood." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. She's playing dirty. She knows most people won't bother digging deeper. They'll just assume we're the bad guys. Despite the mounting tension, I refused to give in. Every time Karen called or sent me yet another email outlining why yoga in our backyard was essential, I deleted it without reading. This wasn't just about yoga anymore. It was about standing up for ourselves. If I let her win now, where would it end? Next thing you know, she'd be dictating what color we could paint our house or what kind of curtains we could hang. One particularly frustrating afternoon, I attended an HOA meeting, mostly out of curiosity, though part of me hoped to reason with them. Big mistake. The room buzzed with whispers as I walked in, and Karen stood at the front, looking smug behind her podium. She launched into a presentation titled "Enhancing Community Spirit Through Shared Spaces," complete with charts, graphs, and photoshopped images of yoga poses superimposed onto our backyard. "Imagine the benefits," she said, gesturing dramatically toward the screen. "Improved physical health, reduced stress, stronger neighborly bonds." Her voice dripped with enthusiasm, as if she truly believed she was doing everyone a favor. When she finished, she turned to me expectantly, waiting for me to cave. But instead, I stood up and addressed the room. "Look, I get it. You want to improve the neighborhood. That's great. But forcing someone to give up their private property isn't the way to do it. My family has plans for our backyard too, and none of them involve yoga." A few people nodded in agreement, but most sat silently, clearly uncomfortable. Karen shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "Mr. Bennett," she said coolly, "perhaps you're misunderstanding. This isn't about taking anything away from you. It's about contributing to something bigger than yourself." Her words hit a nerve. Something bigger than myself. Wasn't raising my kids, paying my taxes, and keeping my yard tidy contribution enough? Why did I have to sacrifice my own happiness for her vision of perfection? That night, lying awake beside Claire, I replayed the meeting in my mind. Karen wasn't going to back down, not unless I gave her a reason to. And then it hit me. Maybe the solution wasn't to fight her directly. Maybe the best way to stand up to Karen was to beat her at her own game. What if we hosted something else in the backyard? I whispered to Claire. Something completely unexpected. Claire rolled over, blinking sleepily. Like what? I grinned. Something loud. Something chaotic. Something Karen will hate. Her eyes widened as realization dawned. "Oh no. You're not serious." "Oh yes," I replied. "Get ready, because Willow Creek is about to experience its first ever monster truck rally." The idea of hosting a monster truck rally in our backyard felt both insane and brilliant. Insane because, well, who does that? And brilliant because it was the exact opposite of what Karen wanted. If she thought yoga would turn our yard into a serene oasis, then roaring engines and spinning tires would send her vision crashing down faster than one of those trucks smashing through a stack of cars. But pulling this off wasn't going to be easy. First, I needed to convince Claire and myself that this wasn't just some half-baked scheme born out of frustration. "Are you sure about this?" Claire asked the next morning, sipping her coffee while eyeing me skeptically. "I mean, it's bold." "Bold is exactly what we need," I replied, pacing the kitchen. "Karen thinks she can steamroll us with her yoga nonsense. Let's show her we're not backing down without making a statement." Claire sighed but couldn't hide the hint of a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Okay, fine. But how do you even organize something like this?" That was the million-dollar question. I had no clue where to start, but I figured the internet could help. Over the next few days, I dove headfirst into research. Turns out, organizing a monster truck event isn't as impossible as it sounds, especially when your goal is less about perfection and more about sending a message. I found a local company that owned monster trucks and specialized in small-scale events. They were surprisingly affordable, especially after I explained my plan, leaving out the part about Karen, of course. Next came the fun part, spreading the word. I made flyers with the kids' help, featuring a cartoonish drawing of a giant truck crushing a yoga mat under its massive tires. The slogan read, "Willow Creek's Backyard Bash, yoga not included." We posted them around the neighborhood, slipped them into mailboxes, and even hung them on streetlights. Within hours, people started talking. Neighbors stopped me in the grocery store aisle to ask if it was true. Kids ran up to my driveway, wide-eyed and excited, asking if they could come. Even local businesses got involved. A food truck owner offered to park outside during the event, selling snacks and drinks. Another neighbor volunteered to set up a sound system for music. It was like the entire neighborhood had been waiting for an excuse to let loose. And now they had one. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Karen caught wind of the plan almost immediately. She stormed over to our house one afternoon, her face flushed red and her clipboard clutched tightly against her chest. "You're turning this into some kind of spectacle," she demanded, glaring at me like I'd personally insulted her life's work. "Not a spectacle," I said calmly, leaning against the porch railing. "Just a little get-together. You know, community bonding, something you're always talking about." "This isn't bonding," she snapped. "This is chaos. Noise. Destruction." I shrugged. "Sounds like fun to me." Her eyes narrowed. "Mark my words, Mr. Bennett, this isn't over." She stomped away, muttering something about filing complaints, but I didn't care. Whatever fallout came from this would be worth it. For once, we weren't playing by Karen's rules. We were rewriting them. As the date of the rally approached, anticipation buzzed through Willow Creek. People whispered about it at bus stops and in line at the coffee shop. Some neighbors admitted they were curious, while others openly cheered us on. Even Claire seemed to warm up to the idea, though she still teased me about having lost my mind. "You realize this is probably going to make things worse with Karen, right?" she said one evening as we watched the kids paint signs for the event. "Probably," I admitted. "But sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, or in this case, yoga mats with monster trucks." Claire laughed, shaking her head. "You're impossible." "Maybe," I said, grinning. "But at least we'll have fun doing it." Little did we know, the real fireworks were yet to come. The day of the monster truck rally finally arrived, and Willow Creek transformed overnight. What was usually a quiet, orderly neighborhood suddenly buzzed with energy. Food trucks lined the street, their colorful awnings flapping in the breeze. Kids darted around clutching balloons and cotton candy, while parents hauled folding chairs and coolers toward our backyard. By noon, the entire block felt alive in a way it hadn't been in years. Claire and I stood on the porch, watching the chaos unfold. "I can't believe this is actually happening," she said, shaking her head but smiling despite herself. "Believe it," I replied, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. This wasn't just about sticking it to Karen anymore. It was about reclaiming our space and reminding everyone that neighborhoods are supposed to be fun, not rigidly controlled. Big Bertha, the star of the show, rolled into our yard shortly after lunch. The massive truck gleamed under the sunlight, its oversized tires taller than most of the kids gathered around. The driver, a burly guy named Jake, climbed out wearing aviator sunglasses and a leather jacket. He tipped his hat at me as he inspected the makeshift course we'd set up, a loop of dirt and crushed cars donated by a local junkyard. "This is gonna be awesome," Jake said, grinning. "You ready for some noise?" "Bring it on," I told him. Karen, predictably, did not approve. She watched from her porch across the street, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Every time someone cheered or clapped, her scowl deepened. When the first rev of Big Bertha's engine echoed through the air, she stormed inside, slamming her door so hard the windows rattled. It was hard not to laugh. By late afternoon, the rally was in full swing. Music blared from speakers set up near the driveway, filling the air with upbeat rock songs. Families spread blankets on the grass, sharing snacks and laughing as they watched the spectacle. Even some of the neighbors who'd initially supported Karen's yoga idea showed up, unable to resist the allure of something so wildly different. At one point, Claire nudged me and pointed toward the crowd. "Look who's here," she said, smirking. Sure enough, a few members of the HOA board had ventured out of their houses, pretending to disapprove but clearly fascinated by the scene. One of them, Mr. Peterson, even gave me a reluctant thumbs up when he thought no one was looking. But the real highlight came when Jake decided to spice things up. After a few laps around the course, he announced over the microphone, "All right, folks, time to crush some stereotypes." With that, he drove straight toward a pile of old yoga mats we'd borrowed from the community center, with permission, of course. The crowd erupted into cheers as the truck flattened them effortlessly, turning Karen's precious vision of serenity into confetti. Later, as the sun began to set and the noise died down, people lingered, chatting and enjoying the last bits of daylight. A few neighbors approached us to thank us for hosting such a memorable event. "We needed this," one woman admitted. "It's been too long since we've had something like this." Even the kids seemed reluctant to leave, chasing each other around the yard, until Claire finally called them inside for dinner. For the first time in weeks, Willow Creek felt like a real community, not just a collection of houses governed by rules. As I sat on the porch later that night, sipping a beer and surveying the aftermath, I couldn't help but feel proud. Sure, there would probably be consequences. Karen wouldn't let this go without a fight. But for now, we'd won. We'd proven that standing up for yourself doesn't have to mean shutting people out. Sometimes it means throwing open your doors and letting the good times roll. The morning after the monster truck rally, Willow Creek woke up to a different kind of vibe. The air still carried the faint smell of burnt rubber and popcorn, and the streets were dotted with remnants of the previous day's chaos. Crushed soda cans, stray balloons, and muddy tire tracks leading back to our yard. But instead of feeling tense or irritated, the neighborhood seemed lighter. People waved hello as they walked their dogs or headed out for errands. Kids played in the street without a care, laughing about how Big Bertha had crushed those yoga mats into oblivion. Karen, however, was not amused. She called an emergency HOA meeting that afternoon, sending out notices via email and even knocking on doors herself to make sure everyone knew attendance was mandatory. By the time I arrived at the community center, the room was packed. Neighbors sat awkwardly in folding chairs, glancing around nervously as Karen paced at the front like a general preparing for battle. When she finally spoke, her voice was ice cold. Yesterday's so-called event was nothing short of a disgrace, she began, glaring directly at me. Noise complaints flooded my inbox all evening. Property values are already at risk because of this reckless behavior. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but no one said anything. Karen continued, her tone growing sharper with each word. This isn't just about one person's selfishness. It's about the future of Willow Creek. If we allow stunts like this to go unchecked, what's next? Demolition derbies, Fireworks every weekend. I raised my hand casually, cutting her off mid-rant. Actually, demolition derbies sound pretty fun. Maybe next summer. The room erupted into murmurs, some amused, others shocked. Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red. "Mr. Bennett, this is serious. Do you have any idea how much damage your little display caused?" "Funny you should mention damage," I replied, standing up. "Because from where I'm sitting, things don't look so bad. Sure, there's some dirt to sweep up and a couple squished flower beds, but nothing permanent. And if you ask most people here, they'll tell you it was worth it." Karen sputtered, clearly unprepared for pushback. "Worth it? Worth ruining the peace and quiet of this neighborhood? Worth turning Willow Creek into some kind of circus?" "That's the thing," I shot back. "It wasn't a circus. It was a party. A chance for neighbors to come together and enjoy themselves. Something you claim to want with your yoga initiative, except yours comes with rules and judgment. Mine came with laughter and fun." A few people nodded in agreement, emboldened by my words. One neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, stood up hesitantly. "To be honest, Karen, I thought the rally was great. My grandkids haven't stopped talking about it since yesterday. And honestly, it felt nice to see everyone smiling again." Others chimed in, sharing similar sentiments. Even Mr. Peterson, who'd given me that covert thumbs up the day before, admitted it might have been loud, but it brought us closer as a community. That has to count for something. Karen looked like she'd been hit by a truck herself, or maybe Big Bertha. Her jaw clenched as she struggled to regain control of the room. "Fine," she snapped finally. "If this is how you all feel, then perhaps I've misjudged the situation. But mark my words, there will still be consequences." Consequences. The word hung heavy in the air, but I wasn't worried. Whatever punishment Karen dreamed up, a fine, a warning letter, another lecture, it wouldn't change what we accomplished. For one day, we'd reminded ourselves that life isn't supposed to be controlled down to the last detail. Sometimes it's messy, noisy, and unpredictable. And that's okay. As the meeting ended and people filed out, several neighbors stopped to thank me again. Some offered to help clean up the yard, while others joked about making the monster truck rally an annual tradition. Claire joined me near the exit, raising an eyebrow. "Well, that went better than expected." I grinned. "Told you it'd be worth it." But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't done fighting. She thrived on control, and losing this round would only make her dig her heels in harder. Still, for now, we'd won. Willow Creek wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And sometimes, that's all that matters. The days following the HOA meeting were surprisingly calm. Too calm, if you asked me. Karen had retreated into her house like a storm cloud waiting to unleash its fury. Her car sat untouched in the driveway, and her curtains remained drawn tight. It was almost eerie, as if she'd given up entirely. But I knew better. Karen wasn't the type to back down without a fight. She was probably plotting her next move. True to form, it came in the form of a formal complaint delivered to our mailbox 2 mornings later. The envelope was thick, its contents neatly typed and signed with Karen's signature flourish at the bottom. She accused us of violating multiple HOA guidelines: excessive noise, property damage, disruption of community harmony, and even improper disposal of event waste. Apparently, the recycling bins hadn't been sorted correctly. Each violation carried a hefty fine, totaling more than I cared to admit. Claire read through the letter with mounting frustration. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, tossing it onto the kitchen counter. "She's just throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks." I nodded, trying to stay calm. "Let her try. We'll deal with it." But dealing with it wasn't easy. Over the next week, cleanup crews worked tirelessly to restore the backyard to its former glory, or at least close enough that Karen couldn't nitpick further. Broken flower pots were replaced, tire tracks smoothed over, and stray bits of debris swept away. Neighbors pitched in, bringing shovels, rakes, and even plants from their own gardens to help patch things up. It felt good to have support, though the looming threat of Karen's fines cast a shadow over our efforts. Meanwhile, the neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Some people sided with Karen, whispering about how we'd crossed a line. Others openly supported us, praising the rally as a much-needed breath of fresh air for Willow Creek. One neighbor, Mrs. Harper, who usually stuck to Karen's side, surprised everyone by admitting she'd secretly enjoyed the event. "Don't tell Karen," she said with a wink, "but I haven't laughed that hard in years." Karen's response was swift and brutal. She called another HOA meeting, this time armed with photos of the damaged yard and a spreadsheet detailing every alleged infraction. "This isn't personal," she insisted, pacing in front of the room like a prosecutor. "It's about accountability. Rules exist for a reason." Her presentation dragged on for what felt like hours, but halfway through, something unexpected happened. Mr. Peterson stood up again, this time holding his ground firmly. "With all due respect, Karen, these rules weren't designed to punish people. They're meant to protect property values and keep the peace. But yesterday's rally did neither harm nor lasting damage. In fact, it brought us closer together. Maybe it's time we reconsider what really matters here." His words sparked a ripple effect. Other neighbors chimed in, echoing his sentiment. Even Mrs. Harper added timidly, "Perhaps we've been too strict lately. A little flexibility wouldn't hurt anyone." Karen looked like she'd swallowed sour milk. Her face paled as she realized she was losing control of the narrative. And the board. For once, logic and fairness outweighed her obsession with perfection. When the vote finally came, the outcome was clear. While Karen pushed for maximum penalties, the majority ruled in our favor. The fines were reduced to a symbolic amount, barely enough to cover the cost of new flowers. As for the yoga initiative, it quietly disappeared from the agenda altogether. That evening, Claire and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Think she'll ever forgive us?" Claire asked, glancing toward Karen's darkened house. I shrugged. "Probably not. But honestly, I don't care anymore. What matters is that we stood our ground and showed everyone else they can too." For the first time in weeks, I felt truly at peace. Willow Creek wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and sometimes that's worth fighting for. Weeks turned into months, and life in Willow Creek slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but with a noticeable difference. The HOA still held meetings, still sent out newsletters reminding everyone about rules for mailbox colors and holiday decorations, but their tone had softened. Karen kept her distance, rarely venturing beyond her porch unless absolutely necessary. When she did appear, her clipboard was nowhere in sight, and her sunglasses couldn't hide the lingering frustration in her eyes. Our backyard, once the center of controversy, became a symbol of something else entirely: freedom. Neighbors started visiting more often, bringing snacks or offering to help replant the flower beds we'd accidentally flattened during the rally. Claire joked that we now had the most popular yard in the neighborhood, and she wasn't wrong. Kids knocked on our door, asking if they could swing from the tire hanging off the oak tree, while parents lingered nearby, chatting over lemonade. It felt like the community spirit Karen had always talked about, but without the rigid control. One afternoon, as I mowed the lawn, Mr. Peterson stopped by with a six-pack of soda. "Thought you might need this after all the drama," he said, handing me a can. We stood there for a while, sipping quietly and watching the kids chase each other around the yard. "You know," he said finally, "that monster truck idea of yours, it changed things around here. People are happier, more willing to bend the rules a little." I chuckled, glad to hear it, though I don't think Karen would agree. Mr. Peterson grinned. "Let's just say she's learning to pick her battles." As summer gave way to fall, Willow Creek transformed again, this time with pumpkin displays and leaf piles instead of yoga mats and monster trucks. But the memory of that chaotic day lingered, a reminder that sometimes breaking the mold is exactly what a place needs. The HOA even loosened some of their stricter policies, allowing residents more creative freedom with their yards. Someone painted a mural on their garage door. Another installed fairy lights in their trees. For the first time, Willow Creek felt less like a gated community and more like a real neighborhood. Karen, predictably, remained bitter. She never apologized or admitted defeat, but her influence waned significantly. One evening, as I walked past her house, I noticed her curtains twitched slightly, revealing a sliver of her face. Our eyes met briefly before she disappeared behind the fabric again. Part of me felt sorry for her. Her quest for perfection had blinded her to the beauty of imperfection. The laughter, the messiness, the unpredictability that makes life worth living. By December, the holidays rolled in, blanketing the neighborhood in twinkling lights and festive cheer. Claire insisted we host a small gathering in the backyard, complete with hot cocoa and carol singing. To my surprise, nearly everyone showed up, including Karen. She arrived late, clutching a plate of cookies and avoiding eye contact, but she stayed long enough to exchange polite pleasantries with a few neighbors. It wasn't an olive branch, exactly, but it was progress. That night, as I sat by the fire pit roasting marshmallows with Lily and Max, I reflected on everything that had happened. Standing up to Karen hadn't been easy, but it taught me something important. Rules exist to guide us, not define us. Sometimes, the best way to bring people together isn't through control. It's through chaos, creativity, and a little bit of courage. And who knows? Maybe next year we'll host another monster truck rally. Or maybe we'll try something new. A movie night under the stars, a block-wide scavenger hunt, or even a demolition derby. Whatever it is, one thing's for sure. Willow Creek will never be boring again. Because at the end of the day, home isn't just about where you live. It's about how you live. And thanks to a roaring engine and spinning tires, I rediscovered what truly matters: family, friends, and the freedom to make your own memories, even if they're a little messy along the way.